The NFL Draft is just a little bit over 2 months away, and I could not be more excited. So on today's show, we're going to take a look at Mel Kiper Jr.'s big board, and we're going to talk a little bit about what draft prospects the Green Bay Packers should be looking at. But before we talk about any of that, I got to tell you guys, I want to break some records, okay? And I need your guys' help to do so. If we hit 1,000 subs by Saturday, that would break a company record for the quickest channel to ever hit 1K. We've got like 36 channels in Chat Sports, and this can be a record-breaking one. All we need is 136 more subs. So if you guys want to join the fastest growing Packers channel on YouTube, then do yourself a favor. Hit that sub button. Start with the biggest needs for the Green Bay Packers heading into this draft. I got 3 of them for you. We've talked about them before. We're going to be talking about them again. Number 1, I think pass rusher. Then I think number 2 is cornerback. Number 3 is wide receiver. Honestly, I think you could flip-flop cornerback and wide receiver. I would have no arguments either way. But in my opinion, number 1, without a doubt, is pass rusher. When you look at the upcoming draft picks for Green Bay, they got a good bit of them. 10 exactly. They got a 23rd overall pick in round 1, 55 in round 2, 87 in round 3. And then when you get onto day 3, they've got 6 draft picks, including 2 in round 7. Let's take a look at who Kiper's top prospects are going into this NFL draft, who he's got rated from that 1 through 10. Number 1, no doubts here. No surprises. The Heisman winner out of Colorado, Travis Hunter. And then the Penn State edge rusher, Abdul Carter. Then you got Mason Graham, Shadur Sanders, Cam Ward, Will Johnson, Tedoroa McMillan, Jalen Walker, Ashton Jeanty, the running back out of Boise State, coming in at 9. And then rounding out the top 10 is Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive lineman tackle out of Texas. So the Packers have the 23rd overall pick in round 1, which means of those 10 guys you just watched, none of them will be available in round 1. So who do I think will be available? Who might be available in round 1? That's what we're about to get into. But before I tell you anything, I want to hear from you guys, okay? Let me know, who is your dream pick in round 1 for the Green Bay Packers? Let me know in the comment section down below. A little bit of a refresher before we get into it. Packers' biggest needs, in my opinion, pass rusher, cornerback, wide receiver. Let's start talking about pass rushers. Here's Kiper's top 10 outside linebacker draft ranking. Abdul Carter, number 1. Mykel Williams, number 2. Mike Green, James Pierce Jr., Donovan Eziraku, rounding out 3, 4, 5. Then you go from 6 through 10. You got Princely, Uman Milan out of Ole Miss, Kyle Kennard, Braden Swinson, Antoine Powell-Ryland out of Virginia Tech, and Josiah Stewart rounding out the top 10 of outside linebackers, edge rushers, you can call them whatever you want to. My favorites, my realistic favorites, right? If Green Bay could get Abdul Carter, he'd be my number 1 favorite on this list. But of the ones that are realistic, number 1 is Mike Green. Number 2 is James Pierce Jr. We've talked about both of them at the channel. However, I'm not sure if either one of those guys will be available at 23, okay? I've done a good bit of mock drafts. Sometimes they're available there. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes you see other guys like Mel Kiper, like Field Yates, those guys do in mock drafts. Sometimes they got them available at 23 and sometimes they don't. So it's really just going to be a coin flip whether they're going to be there or not. I would doubt that they aren't. And so then you move on from those 2 guys, my 2 favorites. And I think Donovan Eziraku out of Boston College would be the next best, okay? He would be just a slight step down, but I think he still has a ton of really solid upside. 80 tackles at Boston College, 21 of those were for loss, 16 and a half sacks, 60 pressures, 3 forced fumbles. He had an unreal year, especially when you take into account the production he had in years prior and the massive step he took into his senior year. However, when you talk about Donovan, when you talk about all the other edge rushing targets, in my opinion, in this draft, edge is deeper than cornerback. And so because of that, unless you have James Pierce Jr. and unless you have Mike Green there, if you have to feel like you have to settle, then I would go cornerback in round 1, because once you get into rounds 2 and 3, you can still find, especially in round 2, good edge rushing targets. But after round 1, I don't know how many really good cornerback targets will be left. Okay, I expect a lot of these guys to go late in round 1, early in round 2. In Kiper's draft rankings, he's got Will Johnson number 1, Siobhan Revel Jr. out of ECU at number 2, Benjamin Morrison, Notre Dame, number 3, Maxwell Hairston, Jade Barron, rounding out for the SEC 4 and 5, then Quincy Riley, Sebastian Castro, Trey Amos, Darian Porter, and Noel Williams is rounding out the top 10. And I think, guys, like I said, I've seen a lot of mock drafts. I've done a lot of mock drafts. And I think there's a small chance that Johnson is the only cornerback taken at that point. So then you would have your pick between Siobhan Revel Jr., Benjamin Morrison, Maxwell Hairston, Jade Barron. Okay? And so I think if you got your pick for those guys, and Will Johnson is the only one that's gone, in my opinion, it's a no doubter to go cornerback in round 1. Even hell, if Benjamin Morrison or Maxwell Hairston or Siobhan Revel Jr., if those guys are gone, one of those, and you still got the other ones, I would still go cornerback in round 1 as well. I just think the talent isn't as deep at that position as it is when it comes to pass rushers, okay? So you let me know, the round 1 selection, who do you think it should be? Should it be a pass rusher? Should it be a cornerback? Let me know in the comment section down below by typing PR or CB. Coming up, I've got more of Kiper's top players. We're going to talk a little bit of wide receivers in the second half of today's show. But before that, I got to ask you guys a question. And I got to ask you guys to, you know what, just prove it for me in the comment section down below. If you love what we've been doing on this channel, the Packers Report, with all the NFL draft content we've been bringing you guys, mock drafts, rumors, draft news, all of that stuff. If you like it, then let me know by liking today's video, okay? I want to make videos that you guys like, so just cast your vote by hitting that thumbs up button. Let's take a look back as we go down to our last, on my opinion, of the top 3 positions of need, and that is at wide receiver. And again, a lot of this depends on what this team does in free agency, okay? If this team brings in a guy like a T. Higgins, makes a massive deal for him, he's the number 1 wide receiver on this team, then I don't think you go wide receiver in the first couple rounds of this draft. But if you go into the draft with Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, we've talked about this ad nauseum, 3 guys who I believe are wide receiver 2s in this league, especially with Christian Watson dealing with that injury that's going to sideline him for much of 2025, then I think you go wide receiver in the first 2 days. And in Kiper's wide receiver draft rankings, this is who he's got. Travis Hunter at number 1. Then we got Tetairoa McMillan, Luther Burden III. Those top 3 guys I think are incredibly special. Emeka Egbuka's got a lot of really good upside. Jalen Royals does as well. And then here's kind of the late day 2, day 3 selections in my opinion. Savion Williams, Isaiah Bond, Alec Ayomaner, Matthew Golden, Jalen Noel. Those are actually going to be, late second round, early third round selection. So my take is I've got mixed feelings on wide receiver because you can get a solid guy on day 2 or day 3, okay? You can find a lot of value, in my opinion, on that wide receiver position late in round 2, late in round 3, maybe even late in round 4. But if you want a wide receiver 1, if you want a guy who's going to come in this building into Green Bay and have the ability to be the wide receiver 1 on this roster in his first year in the National Football League, then I think those guys can only be found early or middle of this first round in Luther Burden III, Tetairoa McMillan, and Travis Hunter, okay? So if it gets to pick 18 and Luther Burden is still there, and I say Luther Burden because I think there's no shot that Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter are still there at 18, right? But if it gets to 18, just 5 picks away, right? Halfway through that first round, and Luther Burden is still there, I think Goody and I think this entire front office should think about possibly making a trade. And you might ask me why. Joey, he only has 676 yards on this past year. He only scored 6 touchdowns. Why would we, A, waste a first-round pick, and B, trade up to get a guy like this? Well, I think not a lot of people take into account his quarterback situation this past year at Mizzou, okay? Brady Cook took a massive step back from 23 to 2024. Subsequently, everybody around him did the same. And Cook was also dealing with injuries. He was in and out of the lineup. But if you look at what Burden did in year 2, as a true sophomore in 2023. I think that's much more indicative of what he would be able to do in the National Football League. 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, only 4 drops. So I think if you get that middle section of the draft, right, you're 5, 6, 4 picks away, Burden's still on the board, I think you make a move. I think you make a splash because I think that guy is going to be incredibly special. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about now. We're going to give the tentative plan as we sit on February 12th. Round 1, draft a cornerback unless Mike Green and James Pierce Jr. are available, or Luther Burden is within reasonable trading range. So you do that. Then draft 2. Say you draft a cornerback in round 1, right? Then 2, I think you draft an edge rusher. I think you get a solid guy late in round 2, a guy you can truly count on to at some point develop into this team's #1 pass rusher if it isn't in his first year. And then round 3, I think you get a solid wide receiver. Okay, this is where I think you get your A.O. Mainers. Okay, this is where I think you can maybe sneak in a Matthew Golden. Maybe not late in round 3, but we'll see when we get here, okay? So those are my thoughts. That's my tentative plan as of right now, okay? As we said, you know what? Round 1, corner, unless some things happen. 2, then pass rusher. 3, wide receiver. You let me know. You shout it out in the comment section down below. What is the Packers' biggest need? I said 3 of them. I want to hear from you guys what y'all think as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. This has been the Packers Report. I am your host, Joey Petersen. If you haven't subbed already, again, we're trying to break records. We're only 3 days away from breaking it, but we got a lot of subs to get there. Help me out. Hit that sub button.